Welcome to the afternoon session of the Belmont Stakes Formulator webinar. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale alongside Mike Hogan. Mike, I'm getting the butterflies. I'm looking at these races. I'm diving into Saturday. I'm super duper excited. What are your thoughts in anticipation of this, the 147th running of the Belmont Stakes and American Pharaoh's bid for Triple Crown history?
Well, if nothing else, it should be a fantastic day for racing. I know earlier in the week it looked like we might have some rain. I think that's now off the table, which is great news. It looks like it will be a great day. There's 13 races, 10 stakes, 6 Grade 1s, and a chance for history. So I can't wait.
It's going to be phenomenal. Now, we've done a couple of these webinars for the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. In both those, we were looking at the Flash or classic version of Formulator. We're going to do something a little bit different this time. You want to let folks in on how we're going to handle this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be looking at the tablet version of Formulator, which recently launched to all users. It had been available for any user that was on an unlimited plan, a monthly or an annual unlimited plan. Now it's available for those that are buying just single cards or multi-card packs. So any user at all for Formulator, you can access it on your desktop or laptop as you normally would. You can also access the same card on your tablet. There's no need, I'm actually going to jump to the screen, there's no need to actually download an app. You just point your browser to formulator.drf.com. It will determine whether you're on the desktop or laptop version, serve you the Flash, or if you're on the mobile version, it will serve you the tablet one, which is what we're going to look at today as we go through the Belmont card. I'm going to jump back a slide or two and also mention anytime throughout the webinar, if you have any questions at all, reach out, send a question. They'll be passed through to Pete. Pete can ask them if it's about one of the runners that we're talking about in the race. We can maybe cover it as we go, or if you have general questions about the tablet version or the desktop version of Formulator or just anything at all, feel free to ask it. If we have time at the end, we'll cover those questions at the end of the webinar.
Absolutely, and if we don't get to any of your questions, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at LoomsBoldly. Mike is at DRF Formulator. We answer questions on there all the time, looking to help folks out if they have a question about the contest world, if they have a question about Formulator, or even just some general handicapping stuff. You can also follow us on the DRF Players podcast. We answer questions on there from time to time, and are generally speaking very open when it comes to all things that have to do with talking about the great sport of horse racing and how DRF, and specifically DRF Formulator, can help you win more money. So reach out to us. Do not hesitate. And I think it's about time we start talking about this race. What do you think, Mike?
Let's do it. Let's do it. We got the field up, a beautiful title card created by the graphics department.
I love it. I love that carnation. It's so vibrant. It's beautiful.
Jumps off the screen at you. So, again, as I mentioned, you just bring your browser to formulator.drf.com. I've done that. I'm going to jump over to the Google Chrome. I'm using a desktop emulator to show what it will look like on the tablet. The webinar tool does not allow you, it allows you to view any of these webinars on the tablet. It doesn't allow you to run them as an administrator. So I'm faking it on the desktop version, so there's a few things that will be a little different. Obviously, if you had a tablet, you wouldn't see this cursor here. So we're emulating it, but hopefully you get the sense of what we're looking to do. If you bring up formulator.drf.com, what you'll see first is this calendar screen, and it shows any of the green ones here. You could jump back to a previous race card if we want. The future ones or current ones are listed with either a red early. All of them are listed as final right now. We've defaulted to the Belmont Park, which is the last card I looked at. If we wanted to change that, you use the drop down, you scroll through. Some of the main tracks are listed up at the top. Others are listed alphabetically below. Fortunately, we're on Belmont, so we're going to stay on Belmont. We're going to dive right into Saturday's race card.
Absolutely. We should point out, we're not going to spend an awful lot of time in this version of the webinar going over all the functionality of the new tablet version of Formulator, but there is another webinar you can access via YouTube last week where Mike, who was your guest on that one, Mike?
Jacob Luft.
Jacob Lewis is always excellent and entertaining. So on that video, Jacob and Michael go through all that basic stuff. Also, we did a little bit more of that in our earlier edition of the webinar today. So if you're really curious more about the nuts and bolts of how the program works, product demonstration type stuff, I suggest you look in those areas. Should be plenty of educational stuff for folks looking to get started with Formulator Tablet. We're going to talk more about the general features of Formulator and, of course, the specifics of this amazing, interesting race card on Saturday with a big focus on the big one, the 11th race, the Belmont Stakes.
Exactly. So we've got all the races listed here. Let's dive right into the Belmont itself. First time you access it, it takes just a second to load. Once it loads, it's instantaneous, and then you can scroll through the field. If you're looking at each of the races and you're toggling through, it doesn't take 5 seconds to load. It comes up almost immediately.
Absolutely. This is a rare little waiting period on the tablet version that will be over in a second. And then I think once we get this loaded, which we just did, we should talk about one of the most popular features of Formulator, from what Mike has told me and having done this market research, the ability to customize past performances. Because I think this specific feature in Formulator, especially when it comes to integrating workouts into the running lines, tells us a little bit of a tale about Mubtahij and maybe gives us a reason to think Mubtahij might be a little bit better than he showed 5 weeks ago in the Kentucky Derby.
Absolutely, and you'll see right here under the views, I'm using the default view, but I want to go in and edit personally. If you've seen any of these webinars, I like to look at not the elapsed time, but the incremental splits. I like to look at this particular horse, not the leader and winner. Pete, you mentioned merging workouts, particularly as they apply to Mubtahij. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll save this as new. We can call it whatever we want. I'll just call this one, let's just call it webinar. And we can save that. We'll be adding and updating it a little later, so it'll be easy to do. You see it's listed right up there. If we want to switch back to any of our others, we absolutely can. But yeah, your point about all of the workouts since the Kentucky Derby, once you merge those workouts, it really jumps into focus.
Absolutely. It's not just a bunch of works listed at the bottom of the page. You can see now that this horse has, how many published works is it there? The type is a little small on my screen, but it's seven
works.
Yeah, 7 workouts in the 5 weeks.
6 works, excuse me.
That's an awful lot for, compared to his rivals here today. And knowing a little bit about this horse and knowing about Mike DeCock, his trainer, this is an internationally famous and fantastic trainer who, to me, the fact that this horse has worked so much since the Derby tells me that maybe he wasn't fully pleased with the way he prepared the horse for the Kentucky Derby, that maybe he thought the horse was a little short, or maybe unfamiliar, great a trainer as he is, not super familiar with American racing, let alone American dirt racing. Maybe he thought the horse would really benefit in American dirt racing from being worked a little bit harder, from being a little bit sharper. So to me, this horse has an absolute reason to maybe run a little bit better. Another thing we should point out is, from Mubtahij's perspective, is from a race flow perspective, I think maybe in the Derby he was a little bit further back than he would be ideally. You can use Formulator to bring up the running lines for his European races, and the word that appears in just about every one of those except the ones where he had a bad break is tracked. And now maybe in the Derby, with the fitness level that he was at the time, he wasn't fast enough to track, and that's part of why he was so far back. But here, I have a feeling, especially breaking from the rail post, that they might choose to be a little bit more aggressive with Mubtahij, and he'll be a lot closer. And if there is a situation where you have horses in front backing up in the stretch, he could be in a very interesting position to make a run. I'm not sure he's fast enough to win. I don't think I want to go that far, but I do think he can run a lot better and get up into the frame for your superfecta in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. In fact, he's the horse that in the daily racing form I picked for 2nd, I think he's got a very interesting shot. Mike, I know you're not as bullish as me on him. Have I convinced you at all to maybe consider using him?
You have. You do make a good case for him. For me, the concerns are more, it's a different ballgame over here. I think he was fantastic in the UAE. Obviously, he looked great in the UAE Derby there. I just don't know if he was beating much. I know that we've got some really good dirt horses here. He's going to have to improve quite a bit in order to threaten American Pharaoh, or even just to potentially hit the board. I think the case you make for him is a strong one, and really, for me, including him or seeing him hitting the board comes down to trusting the trainer, who is, I think, one of the best in the world.
He's pretty amazing. Another point to make about him, and this is a point about this race in general and racing in general, I think. This horse is bred somewhat stoutly. He should be able to get 12 furlongs. Now, a lot of the time, horses who are running long distances, I don't know why this is, but trainers very often will keep horses like this as closers. They will be so far back that even though they're sort of staying on, they're not really ever fast enough to catch horses who've been spotted large advantages. To me, the way to ride a staying horse is the kind of trip I was just describing for Move Tahish. It's to have him within striking distance, not necessarily on the front, though that can work too, but within striking distances of the leaders. So his stamina can really come into play, and he doesn't have to make some huge move running sub-12-second ace to get into contention. He can use his natural stamina to sort of grind into things and get a piece or even win if it's a favorable situation. So I got to say, the more I look at this horse, actually, the more I like him as an underneath key, and maybe a horse I'll even use in some exactas and for a penny on top.
I like it, yeah. I think exactly the same way. I don't necessarily look for a closer in a race like this. I look for a horse that runs evenly, that seems like he's going to want to just continue to run. Maybe won't be that brilliant, but will just keep going when the others have already decided to stop.
It's a myth that closers do well in the Belmont. It can certainly happen. And in fact, this race in particular, you can conjure some scenarios where you could see a pace meltdown situation that could bring a closer like number 2, Tail of Verve, into play here. But for me, Tail of Verve is not one that I'm very bullish on. I think a feature we're not going to fully demonstrate, but we're going to talk about, that's absolutely one of the best things in Formulator, is the ability to look at videos. Why don't you show where folks can find that? There's 2 different ways to access the videos, right, Mike?
There are, yeah. In both the tablet and desktop version, you can either click on the actual running lines. These blue hyperlinks will bring up race videos. They are active in the tablet version. I'm not going to do it here because video doesn't show well through the webinar tool. The other place you can do it is by clicking on the race chart of any of the horse's races. There's a race replay link that will do the exact same thing. And on the tablet, it's nice. It brings it up in a separate window within the same tab. You just close it and you're back to your regular PPs or you're back to your chart.
If we were watching that video of the Preakness, here's what I think it shows. I think it shows a horse who ran well. He was running for second, I believe. He was in the race. Dallas Stewart has done this a number of times in big Grade 1 races. He trains his horses to finish, and he's gotten a piece at very big prices before. And nothing against his effort. I think that's great. The horse ran well. But to me, it was the most non-threatening second you'll ever see. A horse like Divining Rod, to me, if you watch the video of this race, he's really running during the meaningful part of the race. He's trying American Pharaoh on the turn, and he wasn't trying to run second. He was trying to win the race, and those efforts left him vulnerable late to this horse, Tail of Verve, who was just sort of made the one run and in my mind didn't do as much running as some other horses in the field. So take that margin of victory. It's already 7 lengths between Tail of Verve and American Pharaoh. And I guess I'm suggesting that, especially in terms of the win end, the real difference between these 2 horses is probably quite a bit more than that. I have trouble coming up with a case for Tail of Verve cracking the top 2 here. I think it's possible he could be even a little bit overbet off the big effort in the Preakness, and it might not be even quite as good as it looked.
Yeah, I'm with you there. There are some other closers in this race that I think have more of a shot, and especially at prices that are likely to be a little bit better than what Tale of Verve is likely to offer on Saturday. He's one I wasn't too excited about in the Preakness, and I'm even less so in the Belmont, so maybe he'll prove me wrong again and hit the board at a big price.
Let's look at another long shot, number 3, Made from Lucky. And I want to demonstrate something here using the chart tool in Formulator, which is one of my favorites. If we're clicking on the chart for the Peter Pan now, we talk on the DRF Players podcast a lot about the idea of race flow and how some horses are run in a way that favors certain running styles, whether that's a flow that enables horses on the front to do better, or a flow that makes it easier for a closer to come from behind. Often you can find horses who are flattered in one direction or another, or you find horses who are against that flow and maybe end up being good bets the next time out. You can use the chart feature in Formulator to help you make observations about flow. And I thought that Peter Pan was a good example of it here, where you can see from the chart that the horses who are in the top 3 positions at the quarter and the half end up running 3rd, 4th, and 5th here, and the horses who were last and second last early end up 1st and 2nd, like showing you with the cursor, sort of the relevant fields to look at here. And then the other thing you can look at to help you give you information about this is the prices of the horses involved. Sometimes the horses who are 1, 2, 3 early end up in the last 3 positions late because they were 20 to 1 and 40 to 1 and 60 to 1. But when you see a race like the Peter Pan and you see that you have an odds-on favorite here, you have a 2 to 1 shot ending up among the ones at the back of the pack, it seems pretty logical to me that the way that race flowed was very much in the favor of Made from Lucky. Now add to that he didn't score a particularly strong speed figure, and I don't see the case for him improving enough to threaten the best of these. Am I missing anything with this horse, Mike?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Another thing you can do is you can look at, we know a horse like 2 weeks off was stretching out to this 1 1/8 distance for the first time. You can look and see he looked fantastic winning at 7 furlongs at Saratoga last August, and then coming back off a long layoff and doing the same thing at Keeneland in an allowance race, earning a big figure. So knowing that maybe distance was not in his favor, especially considering that this horse is cutting back to the 7 furlong Woody Stevens on Saturday on the Belmont undercard, kind of, I think, validates that thought that some of these horses that were on the front end maybe didn't want to go that far, and a horse like Made from Lucky, who, at least from a pedigree standpoint, might appreciate a longer distance, and maybe the 1 1/8 was right up his alley, took advantage of that contested early pace and really won a little easier than what he might have benefited from had it been a fuller field and had it been a field full of horses that might have wanted to go 9 furlongs.
A couple of points just to add on to that. I absolutely love that idea that you're looking at a chart in Formulator, and then you can click on any one of those horses and see their lifetime PPs. You can see so many instances, especially with up-and-coming horses or horses coming in from other circuits, how great that can be. You see a horse ran in a 50,000 claimer. Well, they're not all created equal. With that tool, you can go through and get some sense of who the competition was this horse faced that day, or that maiden winner. What's happened with those horses from that maiden winner's race? Have they come back and been 4th, beaten 8 lengths, or have they come back and run competitively? And were they running in maiden claimers, or have they stayed in maiden special weights? There's so much you can do just with that feature in the form of being able to access the lifetime PPs. I'm very fond of it. Another point to make, and this is a specific point about the tablet version of Formulator, more goodies are coming. At the moment, one of my favorite features is not included herein, which is the ability to make notes. I actually have a note in my Flash Formulator that same day, the Peter Pan, was maybe not a day where you wanted to be on the rail, where the outside paths were actually better. and you can use Formulator to help make that determination. Why don't you show what you're doing here now, Mike, as far as trying to help come up with ideas like that?
Yeah, one of the nice things about the race chart feature is you'll see on these tabs here there are a number of different views. The standard chart is the one that most people are familiar with, but you can look at how horses did in the next race. Of course, this race was so recent, none of them have run since. You can look at the buyer figure chart to see how had they improved, did they regress off the race, were they coming in one race back with low buyer figures and ones that really wouldn't threaten in the race that they're running on Saturday, or were they coming in off of really huge efforts and they had maybe regressed because those big efforts took something out of them? That's another thing I really love. You can look at just the pace ones, and Pete, your comment about maybe the inside was not the place to be and that the outside paths were better. If you do the DRF comments one, it quickly shows you where horses were on the turn, whether they were on the rail. You'll see Wolfman Rocket was on the rail. He finished last. The horses that finished top two were both 4 wide and 5 wide in the upper stretch. Perhaps, at least in a quick, without watching the race replay, it's an easy, quick way to scroll through, and you can jump through to the next race and see, were the horses that won coming from the rail? Were they coming from off the pace? Were they coming from wide? Were they coming from close up? That sort of thing is really easy to scroll through the whole card with Formulator, both in the tablet and the desktop versions.
You can do that, and you can also then corroborate those ideas by using the video, and then eventually you'll be able to, in the tablet version, and you can already in the flash version, make notes that then just become integrated into your PPs. So every time a horse from that day comes up, it'll say, I think this was a probable dead rail day. And as you get more information, you could change that to, this definitely was a dead rail day. You could sort of communicate with yourself and not lose great thoughts that you had maybe in the immediate aftermath of a race. I just think it's a powerful, wonderful tool, and I'm excited for the day where that and also our trainer tool get integrated into the tablet version of Formulator. But there's still tons to be excited about in the tablet version. The most popular features are all here already, and it's something that I definitely recommend people check out. I've had so many people ask me, when's it going to be ready? When can I use it on my tablet? And the answer is, the time is now, folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. One other thing I'll say about Made from Lucky, and it kind of ties back to what you were saying on Mubtaij, he is the type of, from a running line standpoint, he is the type of runner that I like to see stretching out to a longer distance. He seems to run evenly. He's not a closer, he's not a need the lead and is speed and fade type. The third, second, third, second. He's kind of more of a grinder that seems like, at least on paper, he might appreciate the 12 furlongs. But you're right. I think
give him a shot. I mean, where do you land at the end of the day? Where do you land with Made from Lucky?
I like him. You've made a good case for Mubtaij. I like him a little more than Mubtaij, and if they're going to be about the same price, I would be much more likely to lean on him underneath. I don't know if he's good enough to win. He's certainly shown. We click on the running lines. Certainly shown he's not good enough to even get close to American Pharaoh. Maybe the 12 furlongs is the equalizer. I probably won't be using him too heavily on top, but he's one I like a little bit underneath.
Let's take a look at Fermento number 4. A lot of people know that Nick Zito has had plenty of success denying Triple Crown bids with Datara back in the Big Brown year, and of course with Birdstone and Smarty Jones back in 2004. I think there'll be a certain public sentiment among New York horse players and New Yorkers in general that maybe Fermento is one who could upset the apple cart here. I'm not so sure I'm convinced, and one reason for that has to do with the DRF Formulator breeding tool that we're going to take a look at.
Yeah, and if you click on the dam, and you can do this in either the tablet or the desktop version, you click on the dam, it brings up details about the pedigree specifically from the dam side. And one of the nice things about it is it gives an overview of all the foals. You'll see how they ran on different surfaces, how they ran on at different distances. And primarily, the foals of Ginger Bay, who's the dam of Fermento, have run mostly in sprints. And if you click on her PPs, you will see she was herself a sprinter. Her best effort came in a small stakes race at 5.5 furlongs. She never won a race beyond 6 furlongs. She never tried to run beyond 7 furlongs. So pedigree-wise, and if you look at the actual siblings, you can go through and look at each of the individual runners. There's a 2009 Dixie Union gelding who was primarily a sprinter, a Street Boss mare who was 0 for 1, Ginger Swirl by Hard Spun. She was primarily a turf sprinter and dirt sprinter. And then we have Fermento, who's really the only one to have any success going long. From a pedigree standpoint, he's already, I guess, kind of outrun it from a distance standpoint. It makes me wonder if 12 furlongs is really the best place for him, long term. I don't know. It's easy to knock a 30-to-1 shot, but he's not one I'll probably be leaning too heavily on.
And of course, we should point out that we don't just bring this up to knock a 30-to-1 shot. We bring it up because you can imagine all the other applications where this breeding tool can be the difference between making a bet or not making a bet, where you're looking at impressive maiden winner stretching out. The ability to go in and look at the sire and the dam and all the siblings and make an educated guess as to whether or not this stretch from 7 furlongs out to 1 1/8 is going to suit the horse. Or when you're looking at surface switches, same thing. This can be so powerful and just a terrific way to use Formulator, whether you're looking at the tablet version or the flash version on your laptop or desktop. I definitely encourage folks to check it out. Well, we're halfway through the field, and we're just about halfway through the webinar, so I think we're doing pretty well. We've yet to get to the main event. That's coming up right now when we talk about number 5, American Pharaoh. Mike, I'm going to let you lead the conversation from a handicapping point of view about the Pharaoh. We've talked about him a bunch on the podcast and in real life as well. What are you going to do? What do you think the chances of, and what are you going to do with American Pharaoh, who tries to make history at about 6:52.5 on Saturday night?
Well, you look at it real quick. The first thing that jumps out at you is not just all the wins, not just the triple-digit buyers, but how easily he's done it. With the exception of that Kentucky Derby where he only won by a length, and in an effort that, Pete, you've described as more of a workmanlike effort. Every other one he's been nothing short of brilliant, winning easily, winning geared down, especially in the Arkansas Derby, even in the Preakness. One like a horse, and in the Preakness especially, one like a horse that doesn't seem any worse for wear, with 4 big races in 2 months. Now the 5th race in 2.5 months. He's one that has done very little wrong on the track, especially after that debut. If you're really going to try and find a reason to knock him, it's probably more from a history standpoint, just because we haven't had one win the Triple Crown in 37 years, or maybe from a distance standpoint because he's never run this far, or I guess maybe you probably don't want to take 1 to 2 on a horse that has never gone 12 furlongs before. But boy, watching his races, looking at his PPs, he's one to really think we might have something special here.
That's what I'm hoping, and I think there are reasons to believe that's so. I think some of the cynicism about the horse is based on the hype we heard going into the Kentucky Derby. I think people were expecting something special. And what I think we saw is a horse who ran well, but it was certainly not flashy.
No.
He was very wide in the race. That could be part of it. I'm of the camp, and I felt this way since right after the race, that maybe he didn't particularly like how Churchill was playing that day. He didn't corner well, which isn't something I'd seen him do in any of his other races. there's another theory that John Doyle, the 2011 National Handicapping Champion, put forth to me that I thought was very interesting. I've got a piece. It's either up on DRF.com now or going to be going up shortly with a lot of excellent contest players and their thoughts on the Belmont. And John Doyle mentioned to me this idea that perhaps some of that Derby being, very good but not the eye-popping race that some of us expected has to do with Bob Baffert and the experience he now has on the Triple Crown Trail, and having been so close to winning this thing and not being able to do it. Is there maybe a world in which that he really thought he knew what he had with American Pharaoh? Certainly all the vibes out of the camp since the dead of winter have suggested that he thought he had something special here. Did he maybe deliberately design a campaign where Pharaoh wasn't peaking in the Kentucky Derby and was maybe just a little short of his best effort anyway? If that's the case, look out. I think his Preakness suggests that theory is quite possible, and there is a real chance that this horse is going to live up to these expectations. We've heard people who look at horses for a living, not just the connections. You always have to take what connections say with a grain of salt, because the next time in advance of a Grade 1 race I hear a trainer talk about how his horse doesn't look good, that'll be the first time I've ever heard that. So you can't take that stuff too literally. But when you're talking about bloodstock people, when you're talking about rival trainers, people without reason to buy into the hype machine, and you hear them making these comparisons to the great horses of the 70s, to a horse like Sunday Silence, to an athlete like Michael Jordan, I start to listen. I start to take it a lot more seriously, and also just the way the horse moves. I mean, even I can see that there's something special in the way this horse is built and moves to me that makes me want to believe the hype. I haven't been in support. Haven't thrown my full support behind all of these horses who've gone for the Triple Crown. In fact, comparatively few of them have I been rooting for as a racing fan. This one I'm rooting for big time as a racing fan, maybe have half an idea or two of how we can try to use him and still make money. We'll get to that towards the end of the call here today. But before we move on, is there anything formulator-wise we want to look at and demonstrate with American Pharaoh?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things I want to show, not necessarily because they help you think American Pharaoh is a more likely winner. He clearly towers over the field in terms of his performances, and if he runs his race and gets the distance, I think we could be looking at history here. But one of the things earlier I mentioned that there was talk of potential rain. Fortunately, that's not the case anymore, but if something changes and all of a sudden we get a wet track, you can use Formulator to modify your filters, highlight all of those wet track races where, of course, American Pharaoh won impressively in both of his efforts on and off track. It's one that you can do if, for whatever reason, you wanted to look at the turf races to see how the horses run on good tracks. You can do that sort of thing. It's one of the really, really powerful tools that I love to use in Formulator, not just for big races, but certainly for horses trying new surfaces or off the turf races. You can quickly highlight races that match the actual conditions that you're looking at that day, and this is a fantastic use for the tablet version, especially since track conditions can change so quickly, and you might even be at the track and might not have your printed PPs available. You can pull it up real quick and adjust on the fly.
I love that. I've used it for contest play. There's an example of using the past performance filters in my book, The Winning Contest Player, where our friend May Hemley, at May Hemley1 on Twitter, Emily Gullickson, used those to smoke out a nice long shot that helped me win a contest at Mountaineer back when I was doing the research for the book. Things, if it's a horse who's more of a sprinter and they've been running in route races and you can just take those out, it just tells visually a different story. It's a handicapping tool for the modern world and sort of the modern way of thinking, especially when you're talking about doing it on the tablet version. I'm definitely intrigued to play around with the filters a little bit more. Are we ready to move on here, or do we want to look at the Moss pace?
Real quick, yeah, I do want to add the Moss pace because one thing that's been discussed a lot. Something went wrong. Let's try that again. Okay.
It happens. Even to a pro like you, Mike.
It does happen.
There they are. You just got to click that off, I think.
It's not going away. Let's go back. Let's go back to the race card. Let's pull it up again.
The Moss pace figures, I'll just give a little bit of background while you're dealing with that. This is another way to look at race shape, to make determinations if a race is being run fast early, fast in the middle, or fast late. And it can help you determine who was benefited from a certain race flow. It can also help you, as I think where you're going with this right now, is to determine which horses are fast enough to be a part of the early pace mix. Another possible use of them I could think of is in a race where you think there's a lot of speed, try to determine who the best closer is by looking who has the best late pace ratings. But I think you got this teed up now, so I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, so what it does is, as Pete was mentioning, it gives you a sense of what the race shape was, and this is based on the leader and winners work early, and I particularly like to look at this first one. And the nice thing is it shows you a flat number, and then it shows you a par, whether it was above or below the expected par. You can see the fractions, but often that doesn't tell the story about whether the horse was going faster or slower earlier than expected. And then over here, it shows you what that individual horse did. In the case of the Preakness, where American Pharaoh was the one on the lead, these numbers will be the same. But in the Derby, where Dortmund was setting the lead, you'll see it was 76, and he was third by a length, so he got a 73. Even still, you can see that these fractions, these early pace figures, if we went back to some other runners through the field, we'll just look at Made from Lucky, for instance, much higher for American Pharaoh, which makes me think even if a horse like Made from Lucky tried and wanted to get the early lead, he's just not fast enough early compared to American Pharaoh.
And yeah, that's a tool that comes into effect in so many different races. Particularly interesting in this race where I think many of us believe American Pharaoh is going to go to the front and improve his position, and it does come into play. Is there anybody here who might be able to give him a run early? We'll talk more about that as we continue to make our way through the field, but for now I think we should move straight on to Frosted. Frosted attracting a lot of attention. A lot of people, including our own DRF Players podcast co-host, Matt Bernier, have come out and said, you know what, I think Frosted ran the best race in the Kentucky Derby, given the dynamics of the race, given the trouble he had. I'm not sure I can go there. I do think American Pharaoh was best, but I will give Matt the idea that I do think Frosted probably ran the second best race, all things considered. Why don't you show us, Mike, how to use the chart tool to shed some light on where that opinion comes from about Frosted running better than it appeared?
Absolutely. So the nice thing about this is you'll see the 6 runners that came from the Kentucky Derby that are running back in the Belmont are highlighted here in bold. So you can quickly see which ones apply to the race that we're looking at and that we're actually handicapping. And a real quick assessment shows you that the top 3 finishers late were also 1, 2, 3, albeit in different orders, early. And so the case for a horse like Frosted is that he was 14th, 14th, 15th, and then rallied, was seemingly the only one that rallied late into a pace that favored horses on the front end that ended up 1, 2, 3. And that big run, there are a lot of people, and we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, you think, oh boy, he was running on well late, 10 furlongs. You might appreciate the extra 2 furlongs that he's getting on Saturday. If he had more space, if he had more room, maybe he could have run down a horse like American Pharaoh. I think he ran huge. I'm not sure he ran any better than American Pharaoh did. But there are those that believe that, and if you believe that, you're going to get a much better price on Frosted.
Yeah, I think there's also a case to be made about, should materiality decide to really take the race to American Pharaoh of a horse like Frosted getting in that perfect position just a few lengths out of it. I think he probably wants to be closer early than he was in the Derby. He had been ridden that way before. Do you think he'll be ridden a little bit more aggressively or perhaps even a lot more aggressively on Saturday?
I don't know if he'll be ridden so aggressively that he'll be challenging American Pharaoh for the lead, but I agree he's not going to be 10 lengths out of it early. He'll probably be 3 or 4 lengths back, and try and work out a nice stalking trip where then he can maybe try and quicken or maybe even just keep going while the others back up a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't expect him to be nearly as far back as he was in the Derby, but who knows? If they go super fast early, he might have to be.
That is not what I think is a likely scenario, but there is a world in which scenario where that could be the case. You never know till the gates open. You wouldn't have thought that Eddington would have been out there at the throat of Smarty Jones, would you? So yeah, strange things happen in these races, and if there is a path to defeat for American Pharaoh, which I certainly think there is a path to defeat, he's no certainty. I mean, I would call his 1 to 2 odds. To me, that's how I would price him up. I think we're about 67% to see history. That's still 33% chance of not. And in that 33%, one of the scenarios is somebody, whomever, ends up taking the starch out of him early, and the Pharaoh turns out he doesn't. Perfect conformation, beautiful mover, whatever. He remembers his pedigree and decides that 10 furlongs is enough. And then maybe a horse, we've talked about a couple of closers, but for me, maybe it's a horse like Keen Ice that could come and create some problems for him. I don't think Keen Ice is going to end up first or second here, but he is a closer that I would definitely consider using pretty heavily for third and fourth to try to get a little bit of a price in there. If we move on to him, we can take a look at the Sire Tool, and part of my case for him is I think, unlike Fermento, who we looked at before, that Keen Ice has a good chance to be able to get the 12 furlongs and maybe make some noise underneath here in the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing about the Sire Tool is you can look at how horses by that given sire perform either the last 5 years or lifetime. A lot of these are more lightly or younger sires, so I think Frosted's the only one who's by Tappet, the only one that falls out of that runners within the last 5 years. But you can see, in general, at a 30,000-foot view, are horses by this particular sire likely to prefer sprinting, or are they likely to get better as they go longer? It's a nice little overview tool that works really well for horses maybe trying a route for the first time, or maybe trying a new distance. Well, like all of these horses are trying 12 furlongs here. It gives you a sense of who, at least from a pedigree standpoint, may not appreciate the extra ground. And the other nice thing is you can click on the sire themselves and bring up their full PPs. With modified, we've added the Moss Pace figures, we've changed the fractions, so our preferences carry through to all of the other horses that we're looking at, including the sires, which is a really nice tool.
I love it. I mean, it's definitely helpful in terms of handicapping to get some sense of what these runners did on the track. That can certainly, especially with first-year sires, inform your handicapping a little bit. But just as a racing fan, the ability to go back and look at so many of these great horses we remember and all the amazing stuff they did on the track. Curlin, just a great example, going back and looking at that Belmont and remembering that amazing finish with Rags to Riches and seeing what he went on to accomplish thereafter. I just think it's very helpful for handicapping, but it's just also really cool.
Absolutely. I mean, so many times I think, boy, I'd love to see a Fleet Alex PPs again, or even Curlin's PPs again. You can quickly just pull this Sire Tool up. You just click on them, you get their full PPs at your fingertips. It's great.
Let's now look at a horse that you've made the comparison to Curlin, not that you were overhyping him or anything, but just in terms of a horse that accomplished a lot early in his career and went on to the big Grade 1 classic dirt races with comparatively little experience. You can probably tell by now we're talking about Materiality. Materiality, for me, is a horse that could have just a major impact on this race, whether or not he's able to win. This question of, is he going to be fast enough to challenge American Pharaoh early, and are those the tactics, and this is the unknowable, are those the tactics that John Velasquez is going to choose to employ here? What light do the Moss pace figures shed on this question, Mike?
Well, we looked at American Pharaoh's figures a little earlier, and aside from this sprint race where he in his debut, these pace figures are generally a little slower than what you see for American Pharaoh early, and especially that you saw if you watch the replay of American Pharaoh's Preakness, where he earned this 87, he was being asked early from the gate down at the rail post by Victor Espinoza. You see American Pharaoh, he gets the lead if he wants it. If he's given it, he'll take it. If he needs to get it, he can show that increased early speed to take the lead and quicken. I think if Victor wants the lead, if American Pharaoh wants the lead, unless Johnny Velasquez is going to sacrifice his horse to get it, I don't really see a scenario where a Materiality comes over the top from the 8 post and cuts the corner and gets to the front before the turn. I don't know. Stranger things have happened, but based on these figures, based on what I've seen, I would be surprised if that's what happens.
I alluded earlier to Jerry Bailey and Eddington in the 2004 running of this race, and I'm of the theory that those jockeys in that race definitely did say, let's make this Smarty Jones earn it, and that was one of the reasons for his defeat. Jockey colony's changed a lot in 11 years. It's not. I mean, a guy like Bailey was sort of famous for if he wasn't going to win, he was going to beat the favorite, and I don't think, first of all, I don't think Johnny has that. I don't think that's sort of his MO. I think he's more about doing what's right for the horse that he's on at all times. And I also think that, he, I'm sure, thinks Materiality's chance of doing great here and of continuing to prove himself a Grade 1 horse are probably too great to use a tactic like that. I think he probably sits second flight off American Pharaoh, and he hopes American Pharaoh doesn't stay. I'm kind of guessing that's his path to victory. But again, you never know till the gates open, or if the horse is keen, or there's other scenarios that could make it not that way. But for me, Materiality, if I'm building tickets to upset American Pharaoh, he's certainly one of the horses I'd use in terms of multi-race wagers, but for dramatically less quantities than what I would be doing with American Pharaoh. The other possibility for me in wagering in this race is I could see taking bets like, I haven't done all the handicapping yet, so I can't be as specific as I'd like here, but taking bets like the pick 4 and pick 6, treating American Pharaoh like a free square, hopefully either coming up with something clever in one of those legs or being skinny enough to really play a very strong, lot more than $2 pick 4 or pick 6 will probably just be $2, but maybe a stronger pick 4. Get alive in this leg and then have the ability to potentially save on a horse like Materiality. Let's say they come out on the track. American Pharaoh's looking keyed up. He can get keyed up. Materiality's looking the picture of health, looking like an Elgin marble out there. There's so much souvenir ticket money on American Pharaoh that he ends up pushing the price on Materiality up past 6-1. Maybe all of a sudden I've got my equity to American Pharaoh locked in the pick. Maybe you take a shot to win with a horse like Materiality as a backup. It's an elaborate scenario, but that's actually the way that I'm thinking about trying to bet the Belmont. Do you have any thoughts on how you might bet this race, Mike?
I have a few. But before I get into that, I'm going to put you on the spot. Earlier, you said you picked Mubtaij for second in the daily racing form picks. Do you think Mubtaij is a more likely upsetter than Materiality, or did you pick it based on what you're expecting the price to be between the two of those?
Actually, neither. I picked it because I think in the scenario, in the lesser likely, in the not terribly likely scenario, the 33%, that American Pharaoh, something goes wrong, doesn't fire, I believe that Materiality is a more likely upsetter, and also I lost my train of thought for a second. I believe that Materiality is more likely to win the race. But in the scenario where American Pharaoh just blows the doors off, I could see Materiality getting caught chasing or something happening where he runs out of the frame or no better than third. Move to Age is a horse I just see grinding along, and the way that I think this race is going to be run, I could just see him getting into the number, potentially getting second at a good price, and being sort of a good key horse at a price. So I think especially, I really do believe that, but part of it was in making these picks, I really didn't want to put first choice, second choice, third choice, because I'm really not that convinced in all scenarios about Frosted and Materiality. I'd much rather, from a betting strategy point of view, and this might lead to another way to bet this race, thinking about a bet like the Superfecta, key American Pharaoh on top, key Move Tahij in second, third, and fourth. Heck, you could almost play it $1 to all in the other spots, and then take the horses you like a little bit more. For me, a Keen Ice in third and fourth, hit that extra, and sort of hope that the second and third choices, you know, maybe one of them runs third or fourth, but try to get them out of the exacta, and maybe be able to unlock that bet for a little bit of money despite the short field. If one was smart enough to do that with Divining Rod as the second key horse in the Preakness, it actually ended up paying pretty well despite the short field. Maybe you could have a similar scenario in the Belmont Stakes. Heck, I'm not that worried about it as a betting race. This is a chance to see history. It's something I've waited for a long, long time. But how fun would it be if in your betting you could be on the right side of history too and still be clever enough to make $1? That's having your cake and eating it too, of course. But heck, I'm going to go for it. Why not? It's Belmont Stakes, annually one of the most fun days of the year for me. I'm really looking forward to it, and we'll see if I'm right. But let's hear your thoughts on how one might want to bet this race.
Well, I think you touched on the value coming if you think American Pharaoh is vulnerable. The value will come on the win end because there will be so many souvenir win tickets placed that even if American Pharaoh wins, they're never intended to be cashed. People want to save that $2 to win on American Pharaoh as their piece of history. So there's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars of uncashed or unintended to be cashed wagers on American Pharaoh. That's going to push the odds up on all the other horses. So if you think he's vulnerable, by all means take advantage of that. Place a nice win wager on some of the others. If you think he's a free square, do like Pete was thinking and use him as a free square in the multi-race wagers, or maybe even try and go for the super. I can make a case for Made from Lucky, Keen Ice, and Move Tahij coming in second, third, and fourth in any of those combinations. Maybe do a $1 key over those three. That costs you $6. If it hits and you get Frosted and Materiality out of that super, it'll pay really well even with a 1-2 shot on top.
The Belmont, because of its unusual distance, you can see some unformful things happen at times. For me, I am not feeling to go with great guns trying to beat the Pharaoh, but that idea of going against the second and third choices in the second and third spots of the exacta and the try, that makes sense to me. We did have one question come in. Surprisingly, not all that many questions came into us during the webinar here. There's still time, folks. We got a couple of minutes left. If you have questions about the horses, if you have questions about Formulator, feel free to hit us. I'll throw this one your way, Mike. Have recent Belmont races been favoring inside, outside, speed, or closers? I'm not sure if Mike, who asked us this question, means Belmont Stakes in past years, or if he just means how the track's been playing this week. But I guess answer it any way you find a way in and go for it.
Well, I'll look at more Belmont Stakes because I think you mentioned it, the 12 furlongs for these 3-year-olds that have never run this far before and likely may never run this far again in their career is kind of a unique race. And I think in general, in terms of history, if you go back and look, there are examples of horses coming from out of the clouds and stone closers running down, like Birdstone, running from well off the pace. I think that is much more the exception than the rule. I think if you look at the recent Belmont Stakes races, the winners have all been within 4 or 5 lengths early. You've even got cases with horses like Tatara who just catch an early lead, Ruler on Ice, these horses that are just more forwardly placed and just don't end up stopping at 12 furlongs and nobody else is able to rally into them. I think that's more likely what you're going to see, which is why I downgrade a horse like Fermento, who's probably going to be well out of it, especially with the blinkers off, and even a horse like Tale of Verve, who had to rally from a ridiculously far distance in the Preakness. I just don't see that happening in the Belmont.
And, Mike, if your question was about the recent races at Belmont, I'd say, you know what, for me, it's too far out to start worrying about the specifics of track profile. There's going to be a bunch of dirt races on that day. To me, the things can just change so much.
Yeah.
A track having to do with speed biases can have to do with wind and things that can change at a moment's notice. So you just got to watch on the day, see what paths appear to be doing well, see what running styles appear to be doing well, and don't overreact to it. I think a lot of people make the mistake. They'll see two races, one in the front end. They'll say, oh, it's a speed bias. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. Sometimes those are just the best horses.
Right.
You don't want to overrate that stuff. That, for me, is much more useful after the races have been run. Of course, if you can be the first one to pick up on it, it can become a valuable tool. But just as often, I think you end up making a misjudgment in that case. As ever, for me, I try to rely on the fundamentals of handicapping and then bring those other secondary factors into play as appropriate. But I wouldn't want to get too lost when it comes to that stuff. We can talk a little bit more about Formulator regarding materiality. I'll give you a positive thing and a negative thing that I came up with from poking around in Formulator. The positive thing we can't actually demonstrate to you because it's not baked into the tablet version of Formulator yet, but it is a staple of the Flash version, and that's trainer stats. So much was made about Todd Pletcher's lack of success in the Kentucky Derby. Using the trainer tool, you can see that while he doesn't have an overwhelming win percentage in the Belmont Stakes, you can set up a query to Formulator to basically just see all the horses that Pletcher has run in the Belmont Stakes over the last 5 years. Do you remember how many there were, Mike?
I believe there were 9. He was 1 for 9, the one, of course, being Palace Malice. And that year when Palace Malice won, he ran 4 others in that same race. So
mathematically, he had certainly better odds. But the thing to me isn't even so much the Palace Malice win.
Sure.
Still, that 1 for 9 better than the 1 for 40 of the Derby, obviously. But what really struck me looking at it was how well horses at big prices have run for him underneath. It just suggests
Commissioner
to me
last
that
year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Commissioner last year could have easily won the race. What was he, beat a nose? So it just tells me, I love that idea, though, that you can go and you're looking at your trainer numbers and you're not just looking at some numerical representation of what it means. You can go through and you can look at the actual horses, and you can't help but learn something about a trainer and the way he or she trains when you take advantage of that trainer tool and Formulator that will be hopefully at some point either arriving in the tablet version or possibly superseded by a new tool. We want to mention that one real quick?
Yeah, very likely it will be replaced by Angle Finder, which is very similar to what the trainer tool does in Formulator, except it's at a higher level, where trainer is one of the filters you can add, but you could do the same thing for jockeys. How do jockeys do in graded stakes dirt routes at 12 furlongs? How do horses do in general moving from one circuit to another? How do horses do in general when they get Lasix for the first time? Is it generally an improver, or is it not? Some of those things you can do. Certainly add trainer on top of that as a piece. It's going to be a really powerful tool that should be available sometime later this year.
I could see doing some Bill James type macro statistical work. You always hear, firsters don't win from the rail. Well, now we can pull up all that data and we can look, and I have a feeling disprove that idea in many instances. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll certainly be doing a webinar about that when we get closer. I promised a negative on materiality. Real fast, go back and click on that chart of the Florida Derby. We're not going to have time to do this entire exercise, but I guess maybe hit the next race one. It might tell the story a little bit better than the raw buyers do. You can go back and you can look and you can see that none of the horses coming out of that race that Materiality won, his sort of claim to fame in a way at this point, have come back to win. And if you go through and do that exercise I was talking about before with looking at the Pletcher runners in the Belmont, you can click on every single runner in that field, and if you add it up, you can see that that field is 0 for 13 since that day. So there's just a little bit of negative form data about that Florida Derby. Does it mean he doesn't have a chance? No, not at all. I think it's more interesting than anything else, and it's another one of those tools that you can use in other races with horses shipping in from out of town, or different maiden runners trying to evaluate how strong a certain maiden field was versus another, or a certain 50 claimer versus another. By being able to go through and look at all those horses, you teach yourself so much about the game. Mike, we have a special award for folks who stuck with us for the hour here today. You want to tell them about that before we get out of here?
We do. You can get a Formulator race card either for tablet or for the desktop for a penny. Just go to drf.com/formulatorpps, click on the buy button for a single card, use promo code FREECARD in all caps. You can use this twice. You can use it for Saturday's Belmont. You can save it and use it whenever you'd like. Thank you for attending today. Pete, thank you for being such a great host as always.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. Always a pleasure. We have fun on the podcast week in, week out. I miss the opportunity to make cultural references that make Matt Bernier's face turn angry, but, we'll get to do that again next week. And thanks to all of you out there for tuning in. We really appreciate it. It's always fun talking Formulator. Reach out to us on Twitter. And until the next time, this is Peter Thomas Fornatale with Mike Hogan. We'll see you out there at the racetrack. Let's see if we get some history rocking and rolling on Saturday night.